Hi, folks. I'm Professor Hennessy. I'll be teaching you this summer in our ENC 1102 online class. So what I want to do today is just give you a brief introduction to the course, walk you through it a little bit so you can see the bigger picture of what this course is about and how it works. So first, ENC 1102 is a college composition course. It's about learning to write at a sophisticated college level when it comes to developing good essays. Um, the expectation, if you're taking ENC 1102, is that you've already taken an introductory course like ENC 1101 that introduces many of those key concepts to you. But this course will expand on those writing skills and expand on your critical thinking skills. The key outcomes of this course are to help develop your ability as thinkers and to help develop your ability as writers and communicators. So we're going to be engaging in a number of papers in which you ultimately aim towards developing and further strengthening those skills. So what I'd like to do right now is just sort of walk you through the syllabus and the course schedule a bit so you can see the bigger picture of how the course is set up. So once you get into the course, you want to look at the intro to ENC 1102, look at the course schedule, and look at the course syllabus itself. Now, the course syllabus it's a long document and it's got a lot of important things in it. So it'll take a little bit of a while to go through it. I'll highlight a couple really key things, but you'll want to take your time to actually go through it today. When you get into the course syllabus, you'll see the general information about our course. This is a fully online course. We don't have any live meetings. Instead, you'll be coming onto our course website every day, and you'll be looking at specific lessons. And you'll see in a minute, you'll see the schedule that shows you which lessons you're looking at each day. Many of those lessons have videos like this within it, in which I'm basically teaching the lesson as if we had a regular in-person class where I might have taught it. So the course itself is, again, fully online in that sense. There's no like Zoom meetings or that kind of thing. There's no textbook that you have to purchase for the course. All of the reading and lessons are inside of the course website itself. You'll be able to freely access them. They're available to you right now as you go through the course. And you'll see that the simplest way to get to all of that material is in the course schedule where I have it all linked directly. But you can kind of walk through the course modules and find it as well. I'm not going to walk through everything in the syllabus right now, but I want you to see the bigger picture of how this course is laid out. Because this is a short summer session, we have two papers that you're going to be writing during this course. If you were taking this during the longer like fall or spring sessions, it would actually be 3 papers. And this, because of just the time constraints of summer, I've limited it to these 2 papers and changed the requirements a bit to kind of even it out. So what we're going to be working on over the first 3 weeks of the course is the first paper that you're going to be developing. And today I'll just briefly introduce that paper topic to you so you can see where we're heading. And then once we finish that, we immediately turn around and start working on the second paper. You're going to see throughout the course that there is a process to writing the papers. So you're not going to start writing the paper today. There's some readings that we're going to be doing. One of the things that's unique about ENC 1102 is that you're asked to be analyzing texts of some sort. So with the first paper, that text might even be a visual text like a television show or a film. We'll talk about that in a few minutes. But you're going to be analyzing texts and then engaging in like applying concepts and utilizing concepts to analyze those particular texts. And then moving into the process of writing the paper itself. When I'll walk you through the schedule in a minute, but you're going to see that with the first paper, for example, you're going to develop what we call a thesis worksheet along the way towards writing that paper. And the thesis worksheet is where you actually develop your actual topic sentences, the sentences that will be within your paper as your actual topic sentences for your body paragraphs. You're going to develop those before you write the paper. You're going to figure out those key concepts and figure out how to articulate them. Now, we're going to have plenty of examples within the first part of the course where you see how to do that. But you're going to submit that to me along with your draft of your thesis statement at that point. And then I'm going to give you detailed feedback. And you might do a revision of it and submit the revision. And then I'm going to give you more feedback. Basically, you're going to keep revising until it's perfect and it's ready to go. And then you're ready to write the paper itself. So there's very much a process to the writing of these papers. And you'll be getting individual feedback from me along the way. And you'll find that the feedback is quick. You'll basically get it within 24 hours or so of when you submit it. I know that we have quick turnaround times in this class, so don't worry, I am very much on top of that. Um, I'm going to kind of walk you through that so you can see how that works. But that's an essential thing to understanding how to be successful in this course. You have to fully engage in the writing process itself. If you don't, you won't pass, period. Trust me, I've been doing this for a long time. You will not pass unless you fully engage in the writing process that the course is set up to work around. So I'll walk you through that. But I know that sounds negative when I talk about not passing the class. It's a positive. If you fully engage in the writing process, you will be successful in this class. People do not fail this class unless they basically give up or stop working and they're not doing the things they're supposed to be doing along the way. So if you're just doing everything you're supposed to do along the way, you really are engaging, you'll do fine. Okay. The overwhelming majority of students end up doing very well in this class because they fully engage. So that's why I'm going to walk you through the steps to make sure you've got the playbook to be successful in here. So you'll see that the two papers that you're writing are the large majority of the course grade. And then some of the things they're going to be doing along the way towards those papers are some discussion posts, which I'll talk about in a little bit, and then those thesis worksheets that I just mentioned. Those are kind of steps towards the writing of the papers themselves. So everything that you're doing within the class is directly geared towards those papers. So let me just move into introducing the first paper assignment to you. So one of the simplest ways, well, I guess before I do that, I should show you the course schedule. So within this syllabus and course schedule folder, you'll see the course schedule for our course. It's also within the syllabus itself, but the best way to access it is actually through this course schedule document because I'm able to have everything linked in there so that you can just click on it and go to the thing it's saying to do. So in the first week of the course, it's asking you to read the course introduction, go through the syllabus, read the paper 1 assignment, which we're going to talk about in just a minute. And all you have to do is just click on those things and they should pop up on your screen. If they don't, if you've got some kind of pop-up blocker that's preventing that, you simply go to the content section of the course and click on Unit 1 and you'll find all of those things there. So let's talk about the paper 1 assignments and then I'll keep walking you a little bit through the schedule itself. I don't know why that didn't link properly, but I'll fix that. So you'll see I have a folder called assignment explanations, and there it's got all the assignment explanations. And so the paper 1 assignment is right here. So for this first paper, you're going to be asked to apply a concept to a text. Now, the concept simply has to do with the concept of social order. We have a whole lesson on this. You're going to see a couple of videos within the course on this as well. But the basic concept of social order just has to do with looking at how power is structured within any particular system. So it might be within a society, it might be within a group of friends, it might be within a family, it might be within a school, whatever system we're looking at in a particular situation. It's always worthwhile to examine who has the power, how do they use the power, who doesn't have power, why do some have power and others don't, how is that dynamic created? How is that dynamic maintained? What ideas is the text you're looking at sending about all of that, sending about that use of power or those power structures in themselves? Now, it's a very brief introduction to the concept itself. We have a couple lessons and videos that will be engaging in that and teaching you that concept much more thoroughly. But the purpose of this assignment is to take this concept relating to examining social order and to then look at a text of your choice. So it could be a short story, it could be a novel, it could be a film, it could be a TV show, any text that you want to analyze. And you're going to be then asking yourself, what messages is this particular text sending about these issues of social order? So let's say, for example, I want to analyze a film like Nightmare on Elm Street. And I want to look at the messages that Nightmare on Elm Street is sending about power within society. Now, there's a number of questions I'd have to ask to think about that. Normally, when you think about, big issues of social power, you're probably not thinking about a horror film. But to be honest, with this assignment, the best way to approach this is to not try to write about some obvious historical inequity like slavery or segregation or something horrible like that. Because yes, there's clearly an unequal power dynamic in those situations. There's not much else to say. So it's hard to develop an in-depth analysis that doesn't go beyond the obvious. Instead, with this assignment, and we're going to be going through examples over the next few weeks, it's much better if you choose a text in which the issues of social order are not as immediately obvious to the viewer, where maybe it's not as serious a text. Horror films being an example. They're not serious. They're stupid in a lot of ways, but they're often examining these kinds of issues of social order. A lot of comedies are doing the exact same thing, even though they may not be intending to do that. We're going to go through a bunch of examples the next couple of weeks within our lessons and in the videos that are associated with them that will give you more and more of an idea of how you'd go about doing this. But for this paper, you're going to choose any text that you want. And again, that could be a TV show, a film, a story, a novel. And you're going to be then analyzing the ideas it's conveying about these elements of social order. And now within the paper assignment itself, I've got more details on the types of questions you might ask of that text. As we work through the first couple weeks of the course, we're going to be looking at some texts together, just kind of as examples of how to do this. So you're going to be reading a story during the first week, for example, that isn't really intended. You can, if you want, write your paper about that story, but that's not really the intention of the assignments. The intention of reading that story is for us to practice doing this, is for us to practice looking at a text and trying to examine the ideas it might be conveying about social order. So you'll see within the paper assignment itself, I got a series of questions that you might consider or think about to help you develop some of the key insights that you're going to get to. As the first couple weeks go on, you'll then get to the point of developing your thesis worksheet, and that's going to have your topic sentences and your thesis statements. So, like, I'll jump ahead a little bit here, but in the second week, by the end of the second week, you'll have completed that. That thesis worksheet, sorry, it looks a little bit different from my end than it would from your end. That thesis worksheet looks like this. It's simply a Word document that you have to fill out. And so the first question is, what's the text that you've chosen to analyze? So what's the TV show, film, short story, or whatever that you've chosen to analyze for this particular paper? Now, the text that you choose should be one that has characters, that has a storyline to it. So a TV show, a film, a story, a novel, that kind of thing will work fine. So it's first just asking you to tell me what's the text that you're analyzing so I can learn about it as needed. Then you're going to develop 4 or 5 topic sentences that will be the actual topic sentences for your body paragraphs within your paper. And so again, we're going to go through some examples over the next couple of weeks so you get good at how to do this. So don't try to rush into doing this assignment like right now. You need to wait a little bit of time, get into the first week's worth of work before you start working on this. And so then once you have those topic sentences developed, you'll also be developing a thesis statement as part of this thesis worksheet. So you'll see that that's the first big step in the writing process itself. So we've engaged in some reading, we've been doing lessons that talk about the issue itself, and then we engage in the writing process for the paper itself, which starts with this thesis worksheet. Now, reading that story, starting to understand this concept of social order, that's not the only thing you're going to be doing the first couple weeks. What you're going to see is in the first couple weeks, you're going to be learning a number of key lessons about college level writing. So you'll see within Unit 1, initially we have 5 required lessons that you have to go through. These are lessons on the key concepts that are at the heart of what this course is about. Everything that you write in this course is going to be expected to demonstrate that you've truly learned the things that are within these lessons. So like the first lesson has to do with academic tone. This has to do with basically what we consider formal academic writing, the do's and don'ts of that. Then there's a lesson on essay structure that goes beyond the simplistic essay structure that we might learn at a younger age. And for example, at a younger age, we might learn to be really repetitive in our essay structures. So for example, at a younger age, you might have learned in a conclusion paragraph to start with a phrase like in conclusion, and then just repeat what you've previously said in your thesis and your topic sentences. That's a horrible conclusion. That's mind-numbingly dull. Good, sophisticated college level writing doesn't engage in that level of repetition. So this lesson on essay structure will teach you a lot more about those more sophisticated moves that we engage in at the college level. You might have already learned some of these, you might not have. So every person's experiences are going to be different. So it's essential that you go through these lessons, because I promise you the stuff that you're learning within these lessons may be new to you, and you definitely have to demonstrate them. For example, the lesson on thesis statements. A lot of students at a younger level have learned to write thesis statements that say things like, in this paper, I will discuss A, B, and C. That is not a thesis statement, and it never has been. That's an organization statement, and it shouldn't actually be anywhere within a college level essay. So if that's something that you've been used to doing, now we're leveling up. At the college level, we do a different kind of thesis statement. So I'll teach you that. And then in the lesson, it teaches you what you do, and we look at a bunch of examples together. So I promise you, with the lessons that you get within this course, it's going to teach you what you need to know, but you need to really fully engage in the lessons. And these are my lessons. They're not just random links that I have. It's me teaching you the concepts. So like, I'll just click on the first one as an example. When you go into these lessons, what you'll see is that frequently there's a video version of the lesson essentially on the first page. So you can just click that. That's on my YouTube channel, and it's basically a video of me teaching you the lesson, kind of walking you through a PowerPoint version of the lesson. There's also just the textual version of the lesson itself. So you can just keep going through the pages and like read the text. Frequently on the last page of each of those lessons, there'll be a review questions kind of page. This is just a way of checking for yourself if you're understanding some of the key concepts that were in that lesson. It's just a check of your understanding. It's not something I can see. I don't see if you've done this. It doesn't result in some kind of grade. It's just a way of checking that you got the concept or not. So you just click on an answer and it tells you whether you're right or wrong, and it may explain a little bit more in that regard. So you'll see that within many of the lessons, not all of them, but many of them, it has that, that review questions page at the end of it. So going back to the course schedule itself, you'll see within the first week, you're going to be reading the course intro, read through the syllabus, look through the paper one assignment that I just talked about. We'll look through it in much more depth because there's a lot more to it. And then you want to read the first story that we're going to look at within the course. So this is a story called Sonny's Blues by James Baldwin. And then once you've read the story and you feel like you've comfortably understood it, you're going to participate in the discussion board. The week one discussion is asking you some questions that relate to Sonny's Blues and to applying some of these concepts in terms of like social order and the things that we might be getting into in our paper. So you're reading these first 5 lessons from Unit 1, reading the short story, and reading the paper assignments in the first week. That's all of your reading and lesson work. And then you're making sure to participate in the discussion board. I'll walk you through the discussion board in just a minute. In the second week of the course, we have a few more lessons. We have another discussion board thing, and then you're going to be completing the thesis worksheet itself. So that's actually a lot of the work that you're engaging in that week. That thesis worksheet is absolutely essential to your success in the class. If you do well on it, you're going to write a good paper. If you do poorly on it, you're not going to write a good paper. You really have to have a strong set of topic sentences and thesis statements to write a good paper. Those are essential elements. So that's why we go through that process, so that you'll get feedback from me. And if it's not perfect, you'll get the chance to revise and resubmit it, and I'll give you more feedback, and we'll make sure it's perfect so that you're really ready to go and write a good paper. That's the idea here. And so then we get to the third week, and then by the end of that week, the paper itself is due. I'm going to go through a little bit more in terms of the paper assignment, just to remind you some things, and then I'll walk you through the discussion board. So in terms of the paper 1 assignment, you'll see as you read through this and as you read through the syllabus, some of the general expectations. But here are some of the big ones. So like this first paper that you're going to be writing is going to be a minimum of 1,000 words in length. That's probably around 2.5, 3 pages. It's generally in that ballpark. You're going to use MLA format as part of this. Now, you're not allowed to use any kind of research whatsoever. Every single word and idea that you have within your paper is going to be entirely your own. The intention of this course is to build your ability as critical thinkers. So these assignments are very much asking you to do that. I want to know what ideas you can find within the text that you've chosen. So you're not allowed to use any research whatsoever of any sort. Every single word that you write within this course is going to be entirely your own. On this first paper, there's no research sources used of any sort. And that includes things like AI generative text or editing text like ChatGPT or Grammarly or any of those kinds of tools. You may not use those. That's undermining the intention of this course, and we have trackers that easily identify whether people are trying to use those kinds of things or not. But just as a side note, using those kinds of things would be counterproductive to the point of being in college. The intention of being in college is to grow your ability as a critical thinker and as a communicator, and in terms of your time management and all of those other kinds of really important skills that college is ultimately about. If you are using tools that are essentially cheating or taking shortcuts, you're not going to achieve the goals of a college education. So you'll end up with a student who would do that would end up with a relatively pointless outcome to their education. They won't have learned much. They'll just have gotten a paper, if that. The degree itself is not what you want to be aiming for. You want to be making sure you're aiming for getting an actual education. You'll see within our course that I am incredibly vigilant when it comes to issues of plagiarism, and that includes the use of AI created or edited text. I am the person at Broward College who leads the workshops on plagiarism and AI generated text. I'm something of an expert on that topic, so I take it very seriously. And I'm being as blunt as I can with you right now. You may not use that anywhere within this course, and if you do, you will fail the course, period. That's a violation of academic integrity. So that's why I'm emphasizing it now. So for this first paper, it's going to be entirely your own ideas. Again, you're getting to choose the text that you write about. You're not ready to do it yet because we haven't talked about any of these concepts yet. You haven't learned the stuff you're going to learn for the first couple of weeks. So don't freak out if this seems a little bit intense right now. You'll get there. But if you fully engage in the reading and the lessons along the way, and you fully engage in the steps in the writing process, you're going to do okay with this, right? You're going to learn from it, and you're going to develop a good paper in the end. So, don't feel overwhelmed about this. It is very doable. So that's the paper assignment itself. And again, I've got the whole details there and want to remind you to look through it carefully as you're going through your homework for the week. Also, when I back up and look at the course schedule again, the course schedule is both inside of the ENC1102 syllabus and in the separate course schedule document, but I just like the separate course schedule document because everything is linked there. So for example, you can click on the week 1 discussion and you'll see what you're supposed to be doing in the discussion board. Now, again, it looks a little different from my end than your end, but what you'll see from your end is this. Tells you what you got to do. So the first discussion question is directly about that story, Sunny Blues. So once you've read the story and you feel comfortable with it, you'll be ready to jump into this discussion. Now, these discussion board posts, they're not informal. That you want to aim for this to be a more formal kind of writing. It's not like a whole essay, but you're going to write a paragraph or two in response to the kinds of questions that are asked here. And the questions here are analytical. They're asking you to analyze. In this case, we're looking at some of those elements of social order that might be brought up within this story. And you're going to be engaging some analysis about that. So that's what you'll be doing with the discussion board. At the very least, they're going to be like 150 words minimum, but don't just have that word count in your head. You have to truly make sure you've adequately answered the questions and used textual evidence. You brought in details from the story to demonstrate those points, just explaining it yourself. You don't need to have quotes necessarily. Quotes from the story aren't necessarily instructive. It's you just explaining what you saw in the story that helps demonstrate the points that you're making. That's what we consider textual evidence. That's how you're backing up your points. We call that support. So that's what you're doing with the discussion board every week. I encourage you to read your classmates' posts and to respond to them. The more ongoing conversation that we have, the better. I don't force you to reply to each other as part of your grade, but I just think it's valuable. So I think it's a good thing to do. I just don't feel that it's valuable to force it because then it leads to a lot of inauthentic interactions. But your original post itself is very much graded and it's very much part of your course grade. Okay, so back to this course schedule, you'll see that leads you through what you're working through in the first week. Even when it comes to the pieces of literature, you'll see that they're linked inside of that course schedule. The first one we're reading is the story Sunny's Blues. Where possible, with any of the literary texts that I've assigned, If there's an audio or video version of the story, I've kind of included that with it, either in the syllabus, like linked in the syllabus, or just in the document itself. So for example, with Sunny's Blues here, there's an audio version. There's basically someone reading Sunny's Blues. That might be really helpful as you read along to hear it. So for many students, they find it really helpful just when it comes to literature to hear it at the same time as see it. So that might be a good way for you to go about reading the story. Okay. Other things that I can think about to point out to you when we get to those stages within the course, when you start turning in like the thesis statement, worksheets, and the paper itself, you do that in the assignment section of the course. You simply click on assessments and assignments, and that's where you would upload those documents. Those documents, they're going to be Word documents. You need to save everything you're writing as a Word doc. Even if you're using something like Google Docs or Apple's Pages, they all have the ability to save things as Microsoft Word documents, and then you upload them into the course in these spots. Everything that you write within the course is automatically checked by Turnitin for both traditional plagiarism and AI plagiarism. So, and again, I'm the person who at the college who leads our efforts to focus on that stuff. I lead the workshops teaching all the other faculty about all of that. So I take it very seriously. This is a writing class. The writing has to be your own. The thinking has to be your own. That's the intention of this. So please don't make the mistake of using those kinds of outside sources or AI tools or anything like that, because it would lead to failing the course. And I know, honestly, over the last year, there are some students I've seen in online classes who've gotten into the habit of doing that kind of thing, and they think they might get away with it. And it's a shame because it leads to failing the class, and that's wasted money and time and a wasted opportunity that, of what you're supposed to be doing in college, which is growing as a person and a thinker. So, so please don't make that mistake. Or, if you see other people that you think around you are doing that, ignore them. The consequences will work out for them. Focus on you doing your best and growing as a student, as a thinker, and as a writer, because that's ultimately the point of this course. As you're working through the course, you're more than welcome to just send me an email along the way. One of the simplest ways to send me an email is like the welcome email that I send out at the beginning of the course. You can just simply hit reply to that, and it'll just send it to me directly. You're always welcome to just ask questions along the way, just like you would if you were just raising your hand in class. Just send me an email if you have a question about the reading. If you're looking at one of the lessons and you wanted a clarification on something, I really don't mind. I'm online every day. I'll be answering emails on a daily basis. So you won't be waiting long for a reply. And I'm happy to help you along the way. That's my intention here. As you move towards the writing of the first paper, if you start to feel like, okay, I think I got a good idea for which text I want to use, you're more than welcome to email me and ask me, hey, what do you think of this? And give me some of your initial ideas. I can give you feedback and suggestions on ways to approach it. Happy to do that. I like doing that. If we had more of an in-person class or a blended class, I'd have that as a step along the way that you had to do. But since this is an online class and we have a shorter time frame, I don't require that step, but I think it's valuable. So you're more than welcome to email me with your initial ideas, and I'll give you feedback and suggestions and ways to approach it too. Okay, I think that's everything that I wanted to introduce you to today. I'm hoping this is helpful. I know I threw a lot at you here. So the next step is to start going through the course. Look at the course introduction, read through the syllabus, and now look at the course schedule, and that will tell you what you're going to be doing over this next week. And then start getting into it. Don't wait till the last day when certain things are due to do all the work. If you do that, you won't be successful in this class. You've got to be able to dedicate a fair amount of time to this course each week over the course of the week, not just on one day, to really be able to engage in the writing process and the thinking process and really do all the lessons, for example. All right, so I encourage you to just start to work on that now so that you can get off to a good start in the course. All right, again, if you have any questions as you're working through the course, feel free to send me an email and I'll get back to you as soon as possible. Take care, everybody.